So this topic is building season extension structures to withstand Wyoming weather. In the last program, we talked about the possibility of extending the season, right? So hopefully you got what you needed out of it. I'm not going to go over a lot of this again, but for those of you who are new in the room, I am an entomologist by training. I've had a varied background in work experiences and life experiences. So we will continue on. A little bit of a recap from the last presentation. We talked about hail events in Wyoming, right? One of the reasons that we do season extension is because of the hail, okay? We have the hail alley, right? So a lot of Wyoming is in the hail alley. We talked about this in the previous presentation. LaGrange is the target in the state, and then everything radiates and lessens from there, okay? Wind is probably the number one reason that we have issues in Wyoming, okay? But we have this highly variable season. Where's my person from Pinedale? Pinedale. So we have what we think of as a growing season. We have conditions early on, like yesterday and today, where it's really nice for a couple of days, everybody starts wearing shorts, it's spring, and then we start getting winter and all that stuff. So the limited number of variable frost-free days, lots of winter. We get all of these things that accumulate on us and frustrate us because we want to grow stuff. Why do we want to grow things inside? The possibility of growing more food longer, starting earlier, finishing later, sometimes growing all season long. But personally, I need a break. I like my garden. I spend a lot of time in my garden, but by the time November comes around, I'm done with it. I just want to be doing something else, okay? And the nice thing about a protected structure is you can still garden when the wind is blowing. So if you're having a particularly bad day and you have a protected structure that you can get out into and grow things in, it's therapeutic, right? So kind of a bit of a release from the long Laramie winter that you guys have. Again, kind of a recap. How do we extend the season? You can have a traditional greenhouse structure, but they're really expensive to own, build, and operate, okay? And if you live in the hail zone like LaGrange, Wyoming, you're going to have problems, okay? This is a rammed earth greenhouse that I touched on a little bit earlier. These are a little bit more economical. Talked about the article in Cowboy State Daily 2 weeks ago about a wallopini that is in production in Wyoming. Basically, you're taking the majority of your structure, you're burying it in the ground, and you're covering it and allowing it to be productive for you, okay? The one example that I have is from Alliance, Nebraska. This is Russ Finch, Citrus in the Snow. For those of you who weren't in the previous program, Russ is in his 90s. In the 70s, his wife asked him to build him a geothermal house. He did, and then he said, well, I can do that for a greenhouse. And Russ is producing citrus in Alliance, Nebraska. Okay, pretty, for those of you who came from Florida, how do you think you could grow citrus here? Okay. These things are a little bit more economical to build, but you're building it in the ground, you're trying to figure out ways to heat it and cool it, and so there's a lot of involved things that go along with it. And Russ's particular structure, it costs him $50 a month to heat and cool. So for $600 a year, and he's growing citrus, that's not a bad deal, right? Okay. Anytime you can bury a structure in Wyoming, it's a good idea. I lived in a berm house for quite a few years in Wyoming. Loved it. Never knew the wind was blowing until it snowed and took us 11 hours to dig out one time. Yeah. Anyhow, so how do we extend the season? Hoop houses and high tunnels. I mentioned this in my previous presentation, but Del Jimenez from New Mexico State University invited myself and another guy down to New Mexico to learn how to build these structures. All three of these designs were his. So we have a traditional hoop house. We have what we call a hard-sided high tunnel. And then this is the Gothic style. So it's more house-shaped, okay? A definition of a high tunnel, it's a passive, solar-heated, manually vented, plastic-covered cold frame, tall enough to walk into, okay? It's a really efficient way to grow things in Wyoming, and it's very scalable. So traditionally, greenhouses, if you see commercially growing spaces, they're about 30 feet wide, they're probably 96 feet long. That doesn't work very well in the backyard, sometimes, unless you have a large backyard. So they're scalable. 16 by 16 in the backyard of a home on a lot. You still have yourself you can build yourself a little greenhouse, okay? Again, talked about this in the previous program. We began this program in 2009. I partnered with a gentleman named Ted Craig from the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. He was the grants administrator there. We did this project. He said, hey, I've got this money. I want you to educate people in the state on how to build hoop houses and high tunnels. So we did it for 10 years. We did over 70 workshops in the state and over 100 structures around the state, okay? So I travel the state a lot. I see a lot of different people. And almost every one of these structures was different, but they were all in this hoop house scale thing. We got really good at building a 16 by 32 hoop house. We could build one in about a day and a half from raw materials, okay? And it's an educational program, so it's me instructing you all, hey, go get that board over there. Let's cut it into this shape. Let's do this and this. So it worked out really well. But after about 10 years, I needed a new shoulder. I was getting a little crabby. And so, I mean, it was a really successful program, and we built all sorts of things around the state. We experimented with design. So this structure, this one was put up at the experiment station in Lingle, Wyoming. For those of you who don't know, there is a University of Wyoming experiment station in Lingle, Wyoming, okay? This was a 20 by 72 foot structure, okay? 13-foot center height, had raised beds in it. It was built north to south. It was built that way because it was a twin of one that we built in Torrington, built east to west. We built it north to south because the director of the experiment station at that time wanted to see what would happen, okay? Well, when the wind blows and you have PVC hoops, it airplanes the structure, airplane wings. So you know how airplane wings are large in the front and they taper off in the back? When the wind did blow, it was opposite of that. It would push that structure so it would airplane away from us, okay? So we went in and we reinforced it. I don't know if you can see the 2x6s that we put in there. This structure, we rebuilt it about 3 times. The one in Torrington lasted 12 or 14 years, and then finally the wind got it too. But this one was a constant pain in the neck because we had to go back in and correct it all the time until this. We had a wind shear one day that picked it up, got up underneath it, blew the plastic apart, and then slammed it back down. So, death by wind. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the smaller ones that we did in the workshops. This is the 17 by 32 Gothic style. I really like this one because the roll-up side is not a side, it's actually in the roof. We built it so the roll-up could be up high. So it vented really well, okay? You'd walk in, it wasn't excessively hot in it, and it worked really well. However, 100% of these structures failed. Part of it is, at each joint, it's just a PVC Schedule 40 coupler. And what's it do in Wyoming in the spring about this time of year? Heavy, wet snow. Every single one of these that we built in this state over, I don't know, a 5-year period, got a heavy snow on them someplace, they collapsed. And then what usually happens after the snow comes? The wind blows. So they not only collapsed, but they wanted to blow away too. So here's the funny thing. My personal hoop house is a Gothic style, but it's steel frame. So the hoops themselves are made out of conduit. And I like it. It's okay, it works for me. But do not make one of these out of PVC. Don't do it, okay? This is a traditional 12 by 32 hoop up in Du Bois. It's been reskinned a couple of times. The worst thing that you can do with one of these things is neglect it, okay? If you get a little bit of a rip or a tear or something, and I did not include the photo, but the one in Du Bois, what happens in Du Bois? Why is there no snow ever in Du Bois? The wind blows a lot, okay? They forgot to batten down the hatches one year, and the wind got up underneath the roll-up side and just ripped it right off. Okay, didn't take down the structure, it just ripped the roll-up side off. So wind is really bad. I'm sure most of you know that already. This is a 22 by 56. You know, we played around a lot with a lot of the designs and stuff. This one was at the Douglas Fairgrounds. It has since been removed, and I'll show you what we built in its place. Okay. This is a traditional hoop. It's 16 by 32, has roll-up sides on either side. And so I don't think I included this in this presentation, but using locally available PVC hoops, lumber, the cost to build one of these things is about $2.50 a square foot. Maybe a little bit more after COVID, but they're very economical to build. That's including everything, okay? So if you want to build some type of structure quickly and grow, this is one way to go, okay? Smaller is not always better. So this is a 16 by 16. It's in my mother's backyard in Riverton, and she would complain, it's so hot in here. It's always so hot in here. So in the previous presentation, I talked a little bit about how lakes turn when they change temperature, larger masses of water, it's more modulating to the temperature. Same thing with these structures. The larger the structure, the more even your temperature, your air temperature will be. It just takes longer for that air mass to cool down. It takes a little bit longer for it to heat up. If you have a small structure like this, it can get really hot. That's why backyard commercial greenhouses that are this size, everybody seems to complain about them being really, really hot. It's just a small airspace, okay? So PVC hoop houses, this tile is about $250 a square foot, okay? And I'm talking about the footprint of it, okay? Some structures have been in production for 12 plus years. Just made out of PVC and lumber, right? Lumber starts to rot in about 10. Okay, so I have some things to pass around. So there's traditional greenhouse film. There's the film that a lot of greenhouses have that just looks like straight plastic. I'll take this one. Sorry, taking it away from you. This is woven polyethylene. You guys got one? Try ripping that stuff. Okay, it's very tough. It doesn't fray, it doesn't run, and it is very hail tolerant. So that 20 by 72 foot structure that we built in Torrington. It took us, we were experimenting with designs. It took us a while to build it. I think we finished it in July. Well, 3 days after we built it, we got a hailstorm. And it wasn't the little pea-sized stuff, it was slabs. It was big, sharp, square slabs. And up at the peak, we had one of those things go through sideways in the peak of the high tunnel and put in about a 6-inch rip. That rip stayed with that structure until that structure was taken down 12 years later. So it was punctured, but it was still usable. Okay? Let's see. So if you're selling produce out of these things, depending on what you're selling, your annual gross return is between $5 and $10 per farmable square foot. So your return on investment is significant, and you can pay it off in a year. Okay? Using a team of volunteers during the schools, we could build one of these in a day and a half, a 16 by 32 structure. Okay? Quickest we ever built one was 4 hours, but that was with a team of professional people who had been trained. Okay? I have a website that is called the Hoop House Information Network. And I'm sorry I don't have a direct link to it, but if you go into your web browser, you can go and find a whole bunch of information on hoop houses and plans for any of these structures. One of Amy's students actually built the manual that we are still using out there. So it is available.
Could you please repeat it?
The Hoop House Information Network. Hoop House Information Network. Wyoming Hoop House Information Network.
Oh, Wyoming.
So it's WIN. The Wyoming Hoop House Information Network. Yeah, don't forget Wyoming. You might end up someplace else. I don't know if this will play or not. This is a 3-minute video of us doing a workshop in Rawlins. thing to share.
What do
So-
you call this again?
Woven polyethylene, skin material.
You used on that?
Yes. Okay. So I think I'm getting caught up on last hour's presentation and this hour's presentation and not letting some of you guys know what I'm talking about. So in that video, I used wooden lath strips that had to be painted. Okay. I have since moved to a biocomposite product that's made in Torrington, Wyoming. These are fence pickets. Okay. So they come in, I think they're 6.5 feet tall and they are 5.5 inches wide. I can get 1.5 inches, 3.5-inch pickets out of each one of them. Okay. You can buy them, it's like Trex. I can pass this around. You can buy them at Home Depot for, what did I say earlier? $90 for 6 pickets. You need 33 pickets for some of these structures, okay? If you go to Torrington, if you make a trip to Torrington, you can buy their seconds for $1 each, all right? So it's worth the gas money to go to Torrington, okay? I think, well, I'll start down here. Sorry, you'll get it in a minute. But this is it's a biocomposite product made out of wheat straw and recycled plastic. The company is called Nature's Composites.
The fabric.
Okay, so the fabric is available from a variety of sources. So for each mill of wear, it has that many years of guarantee. So 4 mil, it's guaranteed for 4 years. 6 mil, it's guaranteed for 6 years. However, I have gotten 12 years of life out of a 6 mil product. So you don't necessarily need the real heavy duty stuff, okay? But it will last through hail. It's hail tolerant.
Haven't you double layering?
Yes, so if you double layer it, I would go with the 4 on the bottom and the 6 on top, okay? The 6 has about an 85% light transmittance, so it does reduce some of the light that comes through it. But if you've never grown in a structure like this, one of the things that you will notice is that tomato plants and pepper plants, so if you walk into one of these structures, there's no shadow. Light comes in and at all angles and it bounces around in there. So there's no shadow whatsoever. So these plants are actually getting light from every angle. And sometimes the tomatoes are going to go, oh, it's too bright in here. I can't handle this. They start to curl up and it almost looks like a disease, okay? So you might want to throw some shade cloth on it. So the research is no more than 30% shade cloth. I do this on my own hoop house. Right after the end of May, I'll throw a shade cloth over the top of it and leave it through August, okay? It allows those plants to relax a little bit. They're using all of their leaf surface like they should for photosynthesis. They look healthier, happier, and they don't get leggy with 30%. So I've probably gotten ahead of myself. Sort of, yes. So the next challenge, I mentioned 10 years was a long time. I was getting tired of building them. I needed a break, needed a new shoulder. And so Ted called me up in 2018 and he goes, what do you remember about geometry? Well, not a lot, Ted. The Pythagorean theorem mainly, and that's about it. He goes, well, why don't you come to Bags? They bought a kit, a 14-foot kit, and I need some help. Okay. So he, myself, and another guy who we've worked together on hoop houses for quite a bit, drove to Bags. We get there and we find our contact and the guy goes, yeah, it's in that crate over there. And it was a crate that was probably a 4x4 crate. Like, okay, we crack it open, start laying parts out, no paperwork. Start laying parts out that look alike with each other, no paperwork. Get to the bottom of the crate and there's the instructions. And it was like 6 pages. I read it 3 times. Ted read it 3 times. The guy who was with us read it 3 times. We discussed it a lot. a lot of head scratching. So I called the manufacturer. I called the guy who sold the kit. Had a discussion with him. Basically, he hung up on me and told me I was too stupid to understand how to put it together. So, working for Extension, I'm like, man, that doesn't work for me. I just can't deal with that. So, it also didn't have a doorway. It's like, here it is. How do you get into it or out of it? There was no skin material shipped with the kit. So basically, Ted and I put it together, and the other guy, and said, sorry, you're on your own. You get to figure out how to skin it. And what they did is they got the skin material and then cut it into individual triangles and stapled it on and then put last strips on. I'm like, oh, man. So after working with these structures for so long, it's a whole lot easier to drape the material over the whole structure, start from the top, and put it on. So since 2018, what's happened since 2018? Our lives have changed dramatically, right? So in 2020, I was told I was non-essential. Couldn't travel anywhere. But I worked close enough to Fort Laramie. Fort Laramie got a grant through their preschool there. And they said, hey, can you try to build one of these things for us? I'm like, sure, I got plenty of time. I got all the time in the world. I can do that for you. So I really took my time building it, prepping the parts and pieces, and then with a group of volunteers there, put it together, and have since developed a school on how to build geodesic domes. Okay, I don't know if you can see up here. This is my own design because living near LaGrange, what's my number one problem? Hail, right? So that's a cupola over the top of the vent, the roof vent that allows hot air to get out. Okay, there's also a vent on the backside, but you can't see it through this picture. But this is a 22-footer, okay? A 22-footer maximizes an 8-foot stick of lumber, all right? They're very versatile in design. You can go down to, I wouldn't go any smaller than a 14-footer because there's some things you have to do to a 14-footer to make it work. Otherwise, it becomes a hobbit house, okay? 7-foot ceiling, how do you put the door in, those types of things. I think they survive really well in Wyoming, okay? This is an Afton. You can still get into it. I put Dutch doors into it, so you can still get into it if you want to, okay? But, 4 or 5 feet of snow on it, it's not gonna crush. It's like that egg concept in your hand, right? You can't crush an egg in your fist. And around Wheatland, where the wind blows a lot, you guys are from Wheatland, right? Might blow a lot there. I've got a 14-footer there that they've clocked 90-mile-an-hour wind. No effect. Okay, so that's a good thing. So the two things I talked about in the previous presentation were wind, hail, right? And if these structures are the way to go, okay. Remember this thing, right? So this is at the research station in Torrington. This is its replacement. It is a geotunnel. It is 23 by 72. So it's taking the concept of a geodesic dome on the ends, cutting it in half, stretching it apart, and building connectors in between, okay? This was also built during COVID, and I'm telling you, it's a one-off. I will never build another one of these again. I have a solution, though, okay? It is an amazing structure. It's amazingly sturdy. It looks like, if I have an exterior picture, maybe, I might get to it. But it has 4-foot base walls. They've been cemented, anchored to cement in the ground, because I didn't want wind getting under it like the last one, okay? We actually turned it 90 degrees, so it is in the wind like it ought to be. We use these connectors in the roof, okay? This structure took us 3 years to figure out how to build. Primarily because Ted was isolated and I was isolated, and we were having these discussions via Zoom, and it's like, no, your way is not going to work. So we would come out and we'd build it, and then we'd look at it and look like, that's not going to work. We'll take it apart. So it was multiple events. That's why I said it's a one-off. I will not build. You're welcome to try this. I'm not going to build another one. So we built the dome ends first. Well, this would be like the third iteration of this thing, and then connected the sidewalls to the dome. Okay? And so they're very versatile and very sturdy. The thing about this thing is the outside of it could support many people standing on it. Okay? We had some specialty things we needed to do with it. We needed to be able to get a skid steer into it, so we built a door in the back for a skid steer. And the nice thing about the geodomes, you get a rip in it. You take the last strips off right there. You slide another piece of plastic up underneath it. You put this last strips back on. Healed. Done. You don't have to take the whole skin off like you have to on a hoop house. Okay? I just reskinned my own hoop house last year. I don't like that. I don't like doing that. Okay? So that structure that was in Douglas, that, what was it, 20 by 56 structure. So instead of building one big one, we build 3 22-footers and hook it together. So you've got a 66 by 22-foot hoop house with 3 areas that you can isolate. Okay? So if you get to Douglas, go to the fairgrounds. This structure is there if you want to take a look at it. Okay? Very scalable. My ultimate goal is to build the Olympic rings. No, I'm kidding. I want to build one that looks like this that has 6 22-foot hoop houses in it. I think that this interior space would be kind of neat for water feature, or if you're an aquaponics person, you could put your water source in there and pump it out, those types of things. But you've got to have the space to do it. Okay? This is the one where we had 90-mile-an-hour wind blow on it. So the 14-footers, you might have noticed that 22-footers, I have a 16-inch sidewall. Okay? The 14-footers, I have to put a 4-foot sidewall on it in order to make the door my size. Okay? So it just works better if you have a 4-foot base wall on the 14-footer. Okay? What else? Cost of the program. So to build a 22-footer like this, it costs about $5.50 for materials. That's not including the raised beds. That is just the 22-foot structure. Okay? I've been working out the math to try to figure out the additional material cost for raised beds, to try to build them as inexpensively as possible. And it's about another $1,500 to do raised beds around the perimeter of the outside, the perimeter of the inside, and then a target in the middle. Okay? And it takes about 25 yards of soil to fill them. Okay? So that raised bed material also includes the cost of irrigation, the materials for irrigation. Okay? So for about $4,200, you can build a 22-footer with raised beds ready to go. Okay? So since COVID and my release back into the wild, we've been doing workshops around the state. I've been really trying to work out the kinks of this. This is a smaller scale thing than what a hoop house was. You know, the video that I showed, I could handle gobs of people and point and direct and do those types of things. This, if I have more than 10 people, it's total mayhem. So it's between 6 and 10 people to work on one of these things. I have a manual that's ready to go. It is in the draft version. I keep having people call me up and say, oh, hey, on page 61, there's this error. And I'm like, cool, that's why it's draft. Part of the reason is one of my things that I want to do is we've captured a lot of video of the school. And I want to, where the manual is confusing, I want to be able to tie in QR codes that link to the video so that folks can go, oh, I'm stuck here. I need a little help. What did you do on this step, Jeff? So, but we're waiting for David's shop to help us out with that. The manual works. I've got people all across the country using it to build these things. Yes?
Are you ever planning on putting together a instructional draft for the, what was it, the 23 by 71 foot?
No. If you want to drive to Lingle and check it out, you're welcome to go look at it. But no, there will not be a manual for that one.
I figured I would ask.
Oh, do we have time for another video? Let's see. So this is the Growing Roots preschool in Lingle, and this is just assembling the parts and pieces and skinning it. So I can't remember how long this actually runs, but it is time lapse and it does speed up. I think. There we go. So I use PVC hoops to hold it together. So it's a Schedule 80 PVC hoop, and it's a water pipe. Pre-screw all the lath so that when you're up on top of that structure, you're not driving holes through the skin.
Did you pre-drill any of those holes before putting the screws in, or just?
It depends on who I have working for me. So if that biocomposite product's kind of funny. If you don't use a lot of pressure and drive the screw to start the screw, it just sits there and spins and heats up the plastic and fills the threads. And then when I get the screw up there on top, I cannot get it through the plastic. So you got to use a little muscle to get it started and then let it go. So I am standing on the plastic and the frame of the dome. And I use my body weight to pull it nice and tight when I'm attaching it. But this is just the cupola. So the Growing Roots preschool, it's kind of a fun place. They, the gal that is responsible for it, Laura Kurtzinger, she uses the preschool to start all the plants that are planted in Fort Laramie, that are used in the city planters on Main Street, those types of things. So those kids are learning about growing things, and then they have this space, and it's kind of a fun project. Just kind of a taste for what this is all about.
So is that cupola, and you said there's another vent in there, is that enough to keep it cooler enough during those really hot days?
Well, I am trying to control costs. So two vents are what you get. If you want more vents, I would recommend putting more vents in, particularly in the base, right? So at least 2 more in the base. So you've got airflow from different directions. So this is the raised bed material that is easy to get in Torrington. This is 5x5 beams. It weighs 4 pounds a foot. It's really heavy, okay? It's made out of biocomposite, yep. So I'm working on I don't want to have to ship this stuff around the state for my uses, so I'm working on a different way to do raised beds that's a little more regionally available materials, let's put it that way. So if I'm working by myself and building a kit It takes me about 30 hours to prep all the parts and pieces by myself. Okay, so that includes staining. Okay, and I'm not a woodworker. I'm an entomologist. Did I say that at the beginning of the program?
Yeah.
I like to build stuff, but I am not a woodworker, and I do know why contractors do not want homeowners around when they're actually working. Okay. Okay, so there's some other related videos out there. I don't think that they are available on the Wyoming Hoop House Information Network because that's just Hoop House stuff. I haven't tied any of the geodome stuff into that particular website, but these are playlists out on YouTube, and if you want more information, send me a note and I'll send you the links, okay? Or take a picture of it and go there yourself. Did you get it? Okay. So yeah, been working on the school. It's evolving. I did one last year in Laramie, and it took us 3.5 days from raw materials to finished structure. Okay. My schools this year are going to go from raw materials, finished structure, plus raised beds. So I anticipate that it will probably take 5 days, maybe more, to get the whole thing done. Okay. Again, minimum of 6 people, maximum of 10, just because it becomes kind of mayhem and competition for power tools, and if you aren't doing anything, you get to stain stuff. All tools are provided. I'm pretty much self-contained. The things we talk about, use of tools, development of jigs, because if you have jigs, things go a whole lot faster. Prepping the parts and pieces, staining, building the door, framing and skinning the structure. Draft version of how to complete the manual. Must have 6 people. 2024. Oh yeah, raised beds are also in the 2024 version. So places where dome schools are going to happen this year. We're doing a demo 14-footer in Lander in 2 weeks. Okay. That one is going to end up out on the reservation, but we're actually building it inside in the high school. I told him, I said, let's see, April 20th in Lander. No, I'm not building it outside. We're doing one in Chugwater the week of May 20th. Laramie, we're going to kind of break this one up a little bit. I've got some meetings in the middle of that I'm hosting. So it's going to be the weekend on one end and the weekend on the other end. Going to be in Glendo the week of August 5th, Fort Washakie the August 19th, Cheyenne September 9th, and Cody the 23rd. So we're kind of on this side of the state, but spread out so that if you guys want to attend, you can. And if you want, send me your interest level, and I'll send you information on how to participate. Okay? What can you do with the season extension structure? Extend the season, right? You're protecting that crop. You're growing stuff. This gal has a hoop house, a geodesic dome north of Torrington, where the conditions north of Torrington can be 20 degrees cooler, and she's only 30 minutes north. I mean, she can be significantly cooler than what happens in Torrington. Elevation increase. Harvest greens year-round. She has the same setup as the folks at Fort Laramie. She has the raised bed in the middle. She calls that her salad bowl. It's growing stuff all the time, and it's therapeutic, right? You've got this place that you can go into in the wintertime when the weather is crappy. Get out of the wind, and it could be 80 degrees in there or 90 degrees. Okay. I mentioned this in the previous program. Since these structures are passive, the outside temperature in the wintertime will be the inside temperature in the wintertime at night. Okay, but during the day, you're collecting heat, you're accumulating heat units, you're increasing your soil temperature. And so in the wintertime, you might have to do some additional things to help retain that heat and grow. All right, pest issues. Again, more from me at 2 o'clock on pest issues. You will have them. you will have arthropod pest issues. You will also have rodent issues if you're not careful, okay? Rodents like warm places, just like we do, warm protected places, okay? Plan accordingly and respond quickly. Okay, some other pests, right? All sorts of mice, voles, bushy-tailed wood rats. Told the story in the last class. I've got a couple that I work with up in Encampment. Encampment is 8,200 feet. Oh, by the way, to finish that story, they had a traditional hoop house that was crushed last year under the 18 feet of snow that Encampment got. And so last summer, we built a geodesic dome up there that should last them another 10 years. Anyhow, or longer. But pack rats can be a problem in Encampment and other places. Okay. How do I get one of these things? You can buy commercial kits with really poorly written instructions. Sometimes they come with a Velcro door or a zipper door. How well do you think those things survive in Wyoming? You get one use out of them, maybe two. You get a little dirt in the zipper and it's done, okay? Not very good. Rib spacing can be questionable too. If you buy one of these kits and the rib spacing is further than 4 feet, don't buy that kit. They just won't hold up, okay? And there are grants available through the NRCS to build build hoop houses, but they can be kind of restrictive. And you have to have I think you have to build a large structure in order to do that. But they are available. Plans from UW Extension, yes, I have them. The majority of the materials are locally sourced. Instead of the 5 or 6 page manual that I got with the 12 pager, with the 14 footer, I've got a 170 page manual start to finish. Guides you through everything, okay? Again, it's still in the draft version, or you can participate in a school and learn how to build them yourselves, okay? Simple, relatively inexpensive structures can be utilized to extend Wyoming's growing season, help feed your family, increase market availability for local food, provide an alternative income for you if you are wanting to produce commercially. Okay. Some extension resources out there. Barnyards and backyards, yes?
Do you have to have a building permit for a geodesic dome?
It depends.
Okay.
So in Laramie, if you're outside the city limits, probably not. If you're in the city limits, they passed an ordinance 2 years ago that says that if you're going to build a structure, you need to have a local contractor on that project. So I am not building any structures in the town of Laramie other than on campus. So campus is exempt. So yes, you may. It depends, right? Okay. So we have time for questions. Any questions? Let me see if there's some things I forgot. So how many of you are familiar with hanger bolts? They have a wood thread on one end and a nut thread on the other. So this is what I put in the end of the 2x4 and insert it into the collar and then nut it together. That's what holds this whole thing together. Okay? Did my fake power bar make it around to everybody? Did everybody get those? The fake power bar? Yeah. So hanger bolts, you can pass those around. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Hanger bolt. So since I build a lot of these things, I have some jigs that I've made to pre-drill the hubs. You don't have to make them out of steel. I had a couple contact me from Christmas Valley, Oregon. And Christmas Valley, Oregon is like 100 miles from nowhere, apparently. And the guy said that he was able to find pipe couplers, remount the inside, and put the 4-hole jig in one end, or the 6-hole jig in one end, and the 5-hole jig in the other end. So you only have to use this for 24 hubs. Use this for 24 hubs. So if you can build it cheaper than building a metal one, which is about $85 a piece, you can do that. And I recommend you find different ways to do what you do. But this is the hub material. Schedule 80 PVC water pipe. It has a higher explosion rating. Okay. So questions?
Does the greenhouse film roll up then? It's flexible enough to roll up?
On the
Is that-
dome?
Yeah, or is that not where, or if you
So,
use it on a hoop?
so if you use it on a hoop house, it will roll up.
It will.
Yep. Yep. Yes, sir.
So color of the plastic, we bought a cheaper hoop house that has the green reinforced plastic on it.
Okay.
What difference does that make growing in a green color versus clear?
I've never used a green one. I don't know anything about the green one.
Okay.
Sorry.
It is transparent, you can see through it.
Okay.
It's like maybe the color of her bottle.
The Perrier bottle. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. Did you get any paperwork with it?
Yeah, we haven't sent it yet.
Oh, okay. Time's up. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome.